The Wrong Eye. Chapter 1. The thump, thump, sound intensified with each rapid tapping. She crossed the leg over the other. The thump stopped, but the sound of the axe hitting the stumps persisted. The attacker was a couple of feet away. Sajni threw his hands in the air and thrust his hips from side to side, deeply feeling the lament of the singer warning fellow men of the untrustworthiness of women. She smiled at the awkward moves and resumed the mindless task of grinding the nuts. The pace slowed in unison with the furrowing brows. The twins fighting over who the bicycle wheel belonged to had dredged up memories receding in the background. Sammy winces and limps away in response to a sharp stone he steps on as he tries to wrestle the wheel away from Mummy. He sits and sniffles next to his mother as he examines his cracked, bare feet. One's of a 12-year-old Sajni riding his first mountain bike, one of the first few in the village. Unsure hands had woken her up in the wee hours of the morning, wanting to be first on the bike. The neighborhood kids would politely ask if she could give them queen cakes if she had some. The remnant of the bicycle now collected dust in the former cow shed. The GK-plated beast had peacefully rested on the lawn, attracting curious eyes. Felt like yesterday and a lifetime ago. The life they were just gaining an appetite for had lost its momentum and fell with the firing of the minister Sajni's dad had chauffeured for, over corruption allegations. He had stayed in the city with boisterous, hope-filled steps, the need to provide for his family fueling him. The economy, still shaky under the new elected president, had sent him home 6 months later. He had fully immersed himself at first in the village life, tilling the land religiously, plowing with the neighbor's bull, and the harvest had given back in kind. She had hoped that would be enough, but Simo was a proud man, always had been. Grief for a past life soon took its toll. Faded khakis tucked in work, gumboots started to symbolize poverty rather than an alternative source of earning. She knew he missed the village tour in the Mercedes-Benz that those who knew little of number plates thought his. Gardening hours trickled down and were replaced by long-day hunt for other jobs. This too proved unfulfilling, and he started retreating. She could see him walk into himself and was at a loss on what to do or say to avert it. To find a reprieve from reality, however temporary, he had gone the way of countless others before him. What had previously been an indulgence now turned into a sensory buffer, a means of blunting the edges of reality. One drink had turned two, and eventually the size of the beer mug grew. He would come back drunk and singing a praise song that a musician friend had composed in his honor. He would sing of his might and past glory. She saw a glimpse of former him sometimes when he was tipsy. In the giggling of the twins as he recounted his fierceness, repeating over and over the story where he single-handedly fought off 7 machete thieves who thought he would freely give what he had earned in sweat. He told them tales of popular Luo legends. Of Elwanda Major, the great protector and indestructible warrior who could not be defeated by enemies until, like Samson, a woman led to his fall, discovering that his weakness lay in his shadow. The twins would ask questions each straddled on each leg, while Sajni pretended to read an upside-down book, in a poor attempt at aloofness, thinking himself too old for obvious myths. The kids narrated still the story of Simbai Nyema, a scorned magical woman who had disappeared in the ocean with all the wealth and fortunes she had bestowed on her husband, who had grown proud and discovered alternative use for his hands, leaving him poorer. The drinking had gotten worse, and she had sought him in taverns and beaten down paths, having pissed himself and brought him home each time. It all ended tragically, when a wrong step had sent him falling headfirst into an unfinished well. He had been found 2 days later, green, bloated, and raw. She had mourned and bid farewell to the love of her life, who in 20 years never laid hands on her or even glanced at another woman inappropriately, in times when having more than one wife was considered wealth. The slow descent that their life had taken afterwards hastened with the deterioration of her health. What had started as a blister had now dug itself a well-rounded crevice at the center of her left shin. She could barely market the vegetables and sweet potatoes, leave alone plant them. When pain came, it elicited in her tuneless songs. The cows had gone first towards Sajni's tuition. The two sheeps, white as American pets and fluffy as cumulus, had followed suit when the neighbor's rabid dog had decided to have a meal. The twins mourned the sheep and were mocked for days for it. The family's now sole provider in a cruel role reversal was presently shrouding the logs in grass and leaves before burying them in soil. The charcoal would be ready by tomorrow evening for sale. Chapter 2. I think I might be full from the aroma, Sajni jibed. More for us then. His mother chided back while serving considerable portions of the peanut butter and sour milk stew onto plates. Sajni picked a sweet potato, tore a piece, and swiped it against the stick spoon his mother was using and jammed it in his mouth, skin and all. He shook his hand to rid it of the sting of his mother's slap. Mummy doubled over with laughter. Sammy gave him a thumbs down. He tickled him and he joined his sister in laughter. Together they enjoyed what to others may have seemed an ordinary meal, but had caused the mother significant embarrassment when she had to borrow 20 shillings from Mama Addie's to top up the difference of what was required to purchase a kg of groundnuts. Her eyes glowed in the moonlight. I'm so proud of you, my son. I'm glad you showed them what chemos are made of. She smiled and poked him in the rib with the cooking stick. This elicited Sajni's own shy smile and a downward glance. Did you pass by the district commissioner's office? She inquired of his still smiling son. Yeah, I did. I have some paperwork to fill, then drop it back at their offices before the end of the week. Speaking of which, we have Dad's death certificate right. The shadow that fleeted across the mother's face could have been real or imagined based on its speed. She hoped that this time would be different. She couldn't bear to see another drooped shoulder that the last time's mishaps caused. The higher education loan's board loan application had been unsuccessful as he had missed the cut point necessitated by limited funds as they had claimed. He had opted to repeat the fourth form and had put himself through another year of schooling with odd jobs. This time being second in the whole division had thrust him into the DC's radar, and consequently, he would be one of the beneficiary of the Constituency Development Fund's full sponsorships program. Off course, remind me tomorrow. The certificate is in one of the suitcases. Mama always asked if I could help her split firewood for her guests next week. We could use the money. How much is she paying you? A pause. Not enough compensation for the effort the task demanded. She lets it go. She knew he would have done it for free if they didn't need the money as much. So will the short, well-rounded Matilda be there. Sajni stood up too quickly, almost sending the plate on his lap flying. Let me make sure Sammy covered the hens properly, he said over his shoulder, hurrying off. The mother guffawed behind him. They gathered around the table afterwards, and she read from the book of Job before holding hands and praying for her family. She thanked the Lord for the blessings and beseeched him to protect his children, especially Member, who she hadn't spoken to in 3 months. The twins were shooed to their room to sleep, with Sammy making sure that his complaint about Mummy's tendencies to sleep earlier than a chicken is clearly heard. Chapter 3. The taps had grown in rapidity and frequency in the past week. The pain prompted jerks, and shifts were unbearable for Sajni to watch. They had tried public hospitals, but the treatment given was no match for the stubborn wound. He swallowed the mound in his throat and blinked. He leaned his bicycle against the short, stout mango tree that compensated for its lack of height in bounty. The mangoes hanging from the branches gave it an appearance of a disproportioned man with a torso too heavy for the limbs to support. He went inside, unpacked the content of the polythene bags, and came back out with a glass of water. He handed his mother the indocide and paracetamol. She ripped the green capsule, poured the white powder on the wound, and they both watched as the wound gobbled it down. She ripped 4 tablets of paracetamol, tossed them behind her throat, and washed them down with water. Sajni takes the needle that continued to shake in his mother's weak grasp and continues mending Mummy's torn school uniform. She smiles her thank you. His heart ached. He is reminded of the spontaneous, guilty Ohangla dances she used to bust. Times when she'd sit down with golden bells and teach them different hymns. She'd been almost unearthly, peaceful, brows creasing in concentration as she tried not to drown out their voices. He could recite Samson and Jonah's story before he even knew they were Bible stories. He hoped when his time came to marry, he would inherit his father's luck. Never once did he see her care for their father diminish. She would wipe dirt off him and part him dry after a drunken fall. She would check on him severally to ensure he was lying on his side to prevent him from drowning in his own vomit. She would try to engage him in conversations on evening, when he was sank in the sofa, head bowed and lids closed, feet on the table. One-word replies and grunts only acted as fuel. The resentment he sometimes felt for his father lacked in her. She became even more devoted to him. The passing of the gentler times did not mean cessation of care. Now they both watched the twins chase their dog Angel, now Jules, Mummy's tongue having been too heavy to pronounce the word. The rhythm of the tapping slowed. He told Sammy to start the fire, while Mummy tossed the plastic cups way too hard in the rinsing basin to show her protest. He finished picking shells out of the sun-dried dagger. Small fish, poured them in a pot, added water, closed the lid and placed it on the stone stove. 2 hours later, he chopped onions, tomato and added a spoonful of cooking oil in the pot, sprinkled salt above the ingredients and let it simmer for a while. He prepared ugali, while the twins roasted maize on the side of the stove. Member called back. Sajni informed his mother. The moon magnified the light in her eyes. Yeah, did he sound okay? Did he say it was okay for you to stay with him while you figure out your living situation? Yes, he had no problem with me staying with him. He says he misses you. That cloud over her face again. His eldest brother had always been a troublemaker. The cases brought to their mother ranged from bullying, uprooting groundnuts from people's farms, to hiding in the dark and tripping women at night on their way back from the market, and wheezing with laughter as they blindly felt for the content of their basket in the dark. Excuses for coming back early from school had graduated from rabid dog chasings to encountering organ-harvesting men. He struggled with school, and the sadist math teacher who told them to bring chicken milk and teeth did not help either, and he soon became the teacher's favorite target, having no affinity for the subject. He had finally decided at age 16 that school wasn't for him, and traveled to the city to try his hands on other things. He kept contact in the beginning and sent them money whenever he could, but the periods grew longer with time. Now he disappeared for months with no contact, resurfaced again, sent them a considerable sum, and then went silent again. No one knew where he lived, with whom, or what he did. Her mother had been reluctant to let Sajni join him, but they didn't have much of a choice, having fallen out with the cousins who could have hosted him. Her refusing to be inherited by her brother-in-law, who would have supposedly looked after his brother's homestead and supported them with the gains from the pasha mill, had been considered an unforgivable, blatant disrespect. Mummy finally finished cutting off the heads of the dagger and dumping them on her brother's plate because the eyes stared at her. She took her time finishing her meal, and they both retired to bed after the nightly routine. Chapter 4. He still had qualms about leaving, but he felt he had limited choices if he was to someday build her mom the house he had promised her when he was 10. The one that now lay in form of a 3-bedroomed box mansion on top of the glass cup board with the good china reserved for guests. The supporting columns had been torn off by one of the twins, but it was still in good condition with the patio seats, still retaining some shade of the pink chalk used to paint them. He had first shown her the design of a towering 2-story bungalow, but she had smiled and said that she would possibly get lost in it. He wanted to do as much as he could with the 3 days he had left before his departure. The firewood was well stocked, and super drums and jerry cans were fully filled with water. He would do part-time jobs in addition to studying and make sure they never lacked. Paperwork for the scholarship had been completed, and he was to collect his upkeep check tomorrow. He woke up early the next day, went to the DC's office and collected the 30 grand check that was to sustain him throughout the first semester. He biked 5 kilometers to the only bank they had, cashed the check, and passed by the supermarket on his way back. He stocked on cooking oil, sugar, rice, and anything he thought might sustain his family for a while. He would leave her mother some money and then make do with the rest. The twins had been hopeful, asking one more time if he was sure he couldn't bring them with. Okay then, would he bring them gifts when he came back? To which he told them to write down whatever they needed. Her mother had been quiet for the most part. She had lightened up eventually and reminded him not turn into the compositions he brought her to read. Of guys who had dove headfirst into the university life, associated themselves with the wrong company, and later found themselves either in prison, dead, or hopeless addicts. He had assured her he wouldn't. The excitement of the day fueled his reluctance and impatience to leave. He hugged his mother goodbye at the gate while the twins escorted him to the shopping center, Sammy fidgeting with the long arms of the faded laptop bag, while Mummy carried the box with the cackling chicken trying to make its escape through the breathing hole. His mom had been too generous with the sack of maize. He shifted hands. The sadness of the twins was wiped away with the treats he got them. He hoped the future would keep its promise. Chapter 5. The city welcomed him with a hair-raising cold. The bus that had seemed to have places to be even before he boarded had skidded across the tarmac with determination. They had arrived at 3 a.m. and were dumped at the bus station with no regard for their well-being or safety. He had been warned that the city was not all bright lights and tall buildings. He drew his luggage close and sat on the maize bag. He had hoped Member would give him a tour when he arrived. The Silhouettes he could make out from where he was sitting stood boldly, intimidating yet inviting. In a different place, 5 kilometers or so, 3 men conversed in low tones. The taller of the 3, who was the acting leader, smoked and blew air through his teeth, shifting from one leg to another to dispel some of the cold. He was starting to seriously worry about the shifty, bald-headed new joiner who seemed to listen to instructions in reverse. He had stopped him on several occasions before acting too soon. Their target edged closer, hands deep in pockets and head bowed. The risks were highly reduced this hour, but caution was what had sustained him this long. They would let him round the bend. The man suddenly turned and looked behind him as if to confirm he was still alone. They ducked back in the shadows. The man, having ascertained he was not being followed, fished the phone from his jacket pocket. Good. Obtaining the wallet as well shouldn't be that hard. They were gaining in on him. The tall man signaled for his usual partner that it was go time. He reached forward and grabbed the man in front of him with his lapels, pressing a knife to his left side. The knew exactly what was happening. He turned the face of his phone downward. Sweaty, I'm almost home. See you soon. He clicked the power button, cutting off the tiny voice. I was just talking to my daughter. I'm coming from Mombasa, and this is usually when we talk before I set out for work. The tall guy frowned at the explanation. Most people are usually begging for their life at this time, urging them to take whatever they wanted. The man was eerily calm, which could only mean one thing. He thought he could take them all. Do as he says and we'll soon both be on our way. Hand it over. The man complied. Wallet. I don't have any money on me. Now, he boomed. The guy's hands moved too quickly, and Shiny Head must have thought he was reaching for a weapon. He saw him reach for his machete and instinctively knew. He got out of way just in time. Confusion distorted the man's features, first before the pain registered. His left hand lay on the ground, the polythene bag's contents scattered. A Barbie doll rolled to his feet. Shit. They all ran in opposing directions. Chapter 6. Sadney redialed the number. No answer. It was 7:45. The yogurt he had taken in the car had run its course. He dialed the number again. It was answered on the 3rd ring. Please tell me you didn't forget I was coming. Sorry, brother, I slept late. Are you almost here? Change of plans. Ask any shop watchman where Kale mad at us are boarded. Tell the tout to drop you at car wash. Ask where the Ak Chutich is. It's the apartment directly opposite Black Gate, third door on your left. The key is on the window. You are a smart guy. I'm sure you'll find your way. See you later. The line went dead. Sadney gave the phone back to the kind lady and thanked her. He hoped he would remember all that. Tracing his way to the bus stop had been the main challenge, but he had finally found his way. He unlocked the door. The bedsitter was modest with a brown two-seater couch, king-sized bed, and a brown carpet that needed serious dusting. The mounted 45-inch television seemed out of place. He plopped on the bed and was soon snoring. Chapter 7. At first, he thought he was dreaming, but the noise became persistent. He grudgingly opened one eye and closed it again. The banging on the gate intensified, the murmuring as well. He got up with cloudy eyes. He never made it past the carpet. The force of the door being kicked in sent him across the room, his head hitting the foot of the bed. What the hell? Did he mistakenly got into someone else's house? So you are the tough guy, huh? Think you can do whatever you want and get away with it? It's about time the lot of you is taught about honest work, a man was saying. He tried to open his mouth, but the force of someone's shoe forced it shut. Someone must have stepped on the hen, because the distress pierced through the commotion. He was being dragged to his feet. He slipped on a sweet potato that had fallen from the sack and almost went down again. He wished someone would tell him what he had done. He was being pushed forward. He almost plummeted face first into the corridor gravel, but he righted himself. Outside the gate, everything started happening too fast. Someone kicked him on the side and another one on the knee. He tried to get up, but he got another boot on the back of his head. Everything spanned, and stars confused his vision. We've been lenient enough with you drug, snorting pieces of shit. Someone gave a hearty yeah at the back. The number was growing. He could no longer tell where the blows were coming from. Everything in him screamed pain. The wet crunch on his left feet, where someone had deposited a huge stone, finally made him surrender to the bliss of unconsciousness. When he awoke, it seemed as though someone was scrubbing his back with sandpaper. He seemed to be moving rapidly. It took a moment for reality to fully form. He was tied to a fast-moving motorcycle, being dragged across the tarmac. His whole body felt as if he had been deposited on larva. The rounds finally halted, and someone dragged him with the broken leg back to the spectators. Why wasn't anyone saying anything, doing anything? He could spot sympathetic faces all over the crowd. PLEA. He tried to speak, but his tongue had filled his mouth. The woman in the middle, with the most sympathetic look, took out her phone. He spoke to her with his eyes. She looked away. Where were the police? Someone decided to match his legs. The same crunch, same wetness. Wasn't there a threshold for pain? His brain had stopped releasing pain-relieving substance. Blocking of further sensation from specific parts of the body had proven futile as well. His ears rung. Tell us where the others are. He would have mentioned all the disciples of Jesus if it meant the pain would stop. They took his silence for lack of corporation. The woman who was still fidgeting with her phone returned it back in the bag, and with it hope. Until then, he thought there was still a chance. He probably wouldn't have been able to walk, but architects do not need legs. Someone was putting a tire around his neck. Someone else had been sent for petrol and matchsticks. The first tears of realization found their freedom. This was it. He closed his eyes and sent a silent apology to his mother. Chapter 8. Her veins pulsed with rage. Her friend had gone to call the police, but she knew they would be too late, delaying on purpose. Collecting the body and taking it to the morgue was far easier than taking him to the hospital. Less paperwork. The little shits got what they deserved anyway. You live by the sword, you die by the sword. The poor boy had seemed confused the entire time. Now she wished she had said something sooner, even if it meant being termed an accomplice. Now it was too late. Someone had grown tired of waiting for the petrol and had finished the job with a crowbar. She rushed to the side of the road and hurled. The dead man, who had been found by the road with his hands completely severed off, had set fire to the rage that was slowly building over the increased number of muggings. One of the thieves had been caught and made to provide the self-appointed jurors and executioners with names of his mates before being killed. Reporting the perpetrators to the police was pointless because they bribed their way out before day end. The trust in the justice system to do their job was non-existent. She was sure the boy was a collateral damage in the supposed quest for justice, just like the 3 fresh graduates whose lights had also been extinguished not long ago after mistaking their motorcycles after a drunken celebration. The tall guy, weeping and making frantic calls, probably to the police, released the first tears. Member wanted to kill someone. He was coming home when he saw the gathering and decided to investigate. He suddenly felt cold and begged himself to be wrong. The guy he had grabbed and demanded information from had confirmed his fears. He had called his mother and told her the bad news. She had been quiet for a while and had feared she must have fainted, and then she had laughed, a high-pitched sound that had left his ears ringing. He had called his cousin, who had probably delivered the news home, and people were probably already gathering. He'd let the police do their job and then claim the body later. He would go send off his brother, and the hell he would raise on these people, starting with the bald-headed moron who started all this. They would never forget. Chapter 9. This was by far the quietest funeral any of the villagers had attended. Most people had wailed their lungs out and now sat dumbstruck, either staring at the smiling mother, the confused twins, or the lone casket by the veranda. Usually people, mostly just arriving relatives, would peer down the coffin and burst into tears, urging others along. This, however, was a closed casket. The mother had been found yesterday 6 kilometers away, close to Sajni's former high school, confused, with no memory of how she got there. She didn't recognize the people who had brought her home. Her demeanor currently was of someone who was in awe. She seemed to be wondering what these many people's business in her home was, but she was too polite to chase them away, so she was simply waiting for them to leave. She shooed a fly off her wound. There was no one to give a eulogy. The brother had refused to attend the funeral. The maternal grandmother was 90, stooping and barely coherent. Even the pastor's conviction seemed doubtful, his voice dumb. He tried to convince the congregants of God's decision to call the young man home early, but few seemed to be listening. The mother had been given clean clothes and now carried Mummy on her thigh, while Sammy sat on her left side after she told the boy the seat on the right was reserved for their father. The woman beside her broke into a fresh wave of tears. After the funeral, instead of heading to the tents for meals, which was a major motivation for people usually attending funerals, most had gone home, deeply sympathetic, while guiltily relieved the tragedy had not befallen them. The 9-year-old twins would live with their grandmother. The few that remained broke their hearts further witnessing Chebai being dragged back on several occasions after she was caught trying to leave. She would eventually succeed, marking her first numerous travels that would see her disappear for weeks, months. She was on a journey, a mission to find her son. The God she served would not let her bury another unrecognizable corpse. Some people thought she was crazy, others possessed. With a singular decision to right a wrong, and in an unjust quest for justice, they plucked the wrong eye and set a family on a path of no return. Collateral damage for some was a whole family legacy.